Today is April 13, 2020, and this is episode 3 of Blurred Laws and Life with me, your host, Richard Busch. I hope you all have enjoyed the first 2 episodes. I'm really enjoying doing these, and I hope you are finding them entertaining and informative. My guest on today's episode of Blurred Laws and Life is none other than Jillian Michaels. Jillian, as you probably know, became a cultural phenomenon and a household name through the many seasons of the television show The Biggest Loser. Jillian became the preeminent fitness personality in the world. Her fitness videos broke the record for the most sold fitness videos and still today are among the most popular fitness videos ever distributed. She has been on the cover of countless magazines offering fitness advice, health advice, and an entire lifestyle to a generation of people who are looking for the most healthy way to live their lives and to maximize their fitness potential. Jillian's company's name is Empowered Media, where she has a partner and her CEO, Giancarlo Chersich. And Giancarlo will also be on the show today discussing many topics with Jillian and myself, ranging from their business ventures to how digital media and online exploitation of fitness content has changed the industry. Jillian and Giancarlo came into my life around 2015. They had a distribution deal with Lionsgate Film Company that was entered into around 2005 or 6 to create fitness videos for Lionsgate to distribute to the general public. Under the distribution agreement with Lionsgate, Jillian only got paid for distributed units of the videos that she created. In other words, Jillian received a royalty for each distributed unit of each fitness video that she created. This was at a time when YouTube was not anything like YouTube later became and has become, and content was not distributed on the internet in any way like it is today. So there was no provision in the agreement under which Jillian would share in ad revenue, for example, or licensed revenue of any kind. She solely received money from the distributed units of her videos. In 2011, Lionsgate entered into a deal with Google to create what became known as the BeFit YouTube channel, BeFit. And the idea was that Lionsgate would be able to establish a one-shop site for fitness content and would derive revenue from advertising as well as selling potential products on the BeFit channel. At the time, Jillian's fitness videos, even the earlier videos, were still the top sellers of any fitness videos in the industry. Lionsgate, however, took Jillian's fitness videos that she created and placed them on the BeFit YouTube channel for free for anyone in the world to access 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at no charge to them. That act had the inevitable impact of severely damaging the demand for Jillian's videos, because if you can get it for free, why would you pay for it? And Jillian and Giancarlo were obviously upset about this, but Lionsgate took the position that they had the sole right to distribute the videos in any way they deemed appropriate. Lionsgate argued that they had the absolute right to make distribution decisions. They had the right to exploit the videos in any way they saw fit, and that they believed that supposedly doing so would increase the demand for Jillian Michaels' videos because it would expose her videos to people who might not have known about them or known about Jillian. Jillian thought that that position was absolutely preposterous and that no one would buy something that you could get for free, and that the contract did not allow Lionsgate to simply give away her product for free. So Giancarlo and Jillian contacted me in 2015, and under their agreement with Lionsgate, the contract had an arbitration requirement that required any dispute to be submitted to an arbitrator as opposed to being able to file a lawsuit in court. So that is what we did. We filed an arbitration demand with JAMS. JAMS stands for the Judge Advocate Mediation Service, and it is a business that has essentially retired judges serving as arbitrators. Not all the time. Many times it's perhaps a very experienced attorney, but it's a panel of mostly retired judges who now adjudicate disputes for a fee. And the benefit of an arbitration is that it is generally quicker, it is generally less expensive, you can control the timing more so than in a court, and you generally have a final decision that is essentially not subject to appeal other than under very limited circumstances. So it provides quicker, I should say, dispute resolution process than a court. I personally am not generally a fan of arbitration because you are putting your fate into a single arbitrator to make a decision that, as I said, with limited exceptions, and there are exceptions, but much more limited than a court, you do not have a right to appeal. Also, if you're a fan of a jury trial, which I generally am, you lose the right to a jury trial. So it is, in my opinion, a mixed bag, but the reason that companies generally like mediations is because, as I said, it's a much more streamlined process. Large corporations generally don't like to be in front of a jury, and while you get a list of 5 or 6 potential arbitrators from the arbitration company, JAMS, for example, is one of them. Another one is called AAA. You can have more control over who your arbitrator judge might be than you would in a court of law. So companies generally like that process. Arbitrators are also much less inclined to award punitive damages when those are available. The argument of Lionsgate at the arbitration was, as I mentioned earlier, a few things. Number one, that they had the exclusive right to distribute the Jillian Michaels videos in any form of media that they decided to exploit it in, that there was no restriction on their right to distribute in any form of media, and that therefore they had the absolute right to distribute the Jillian Michaels videos on YouTube as they were doing. Furthermore, they argued that even if there was a limited right to distribute, that they did not have the right to distribute on YouTube, which they adamantly believed they did, that there were no damages to Jillian because there was no way to prove that any consumer didn't purchase her video because a segment of it or segments of it were available on YouTube. So the contract between Lionsgate and Jillian on distribution rights said that distributor had the exclusive right to distribute the pictures, meaning the Jillian Michaels video, in all media, whether now known or hereafter devised, including without limitation, all theatrical, non-theatrical, home video, television, and ancillary and derivative rights in and to the pictures by all methods of delivery, whether now known or hereinafter devised, including without limitation all internet delivery mechanisms, all as such rights may be more specifically defined in Schedule A, which is attached hereto and incorporated herein by this reference. So that sounded pretty damn broad. it sounded like it gave Lionsgate the exclusive right to distribute the pictures in any form of media they chose, which would, in their view, include YouTube. But then if we went to the Schedule A that was referenced, there was language that says, without limiting the generality of the foregoing, distributor is hereby granted the sole and exclusive right to produce and distribute the pictures in all languages in all media, whether now known or hereinafter devised, including but not limited to theatrical, home video rights, open parentheses, including without limitation rental, sell-through, open parentheses, including but not limited to electronic sell-through, including but not limited to download to own and download to burn, close parentheses, video on demand, and other pay-per-transaction methods of distribution, close parentheses. So Lionsgate argued that the language that preceded Schedule A was very clear that they had the right to distribute in any form of media whatsoever. And we argued that the language that I just read, which says video on demand, comma, and other pay-per-transaction methods of distribution, limited the exploitation to only paid methods of distribution. They argue that that was not intended to be limiting and that it was simply language to say that in addition to all their other rights, they could distribute in other pay-per-transaction methods of distribution. Lionsgate's argument would have been much stronger, not to say they would have won, because I still don't think they would have won, but they would have had a better argument, perhaps, had they not had that language and other pay-per-transaction methods of distribution. If they had just said that they had the exclusive right to distribute in all forms of media now known or hereinafter devised without any set of examples, they may have had a better argument, because there is a line of cases that I have come across that says that when you list examples, that the only forms of distribution that are allowable are forms of distribution that are consistent with the examples that you listed. So you remember episode 2 discussed the Eminem digital download case that we won. There was another composer who, following our victory, filed a lawsuit claiming that he was entitled to 50% of net receipts as well under his licensing provision. And in his licensing provision, it said that he was entitled to 50% of net receipts on licensed income, and it gave examples like compilation albums, film, TV, things of that nature. And the court ruled that he was not entitled to 50% of net receipts on permanent downloads because the examples given were different than permanent downloads, and that the only types of licenses that he would be entitled to 50% of net receipts on would be licenses that were similar to the examples given. So we actually used that case in the arbitration to make the argument that all of the examples that I just read to you from the Exhibit A of the distribution language were paid for methods of distribution, free, and YouTube was not envisioned, and therefore Lionsgate did not have the right to distribute Jillian's videos on YouTube in an ad-supported, paid-for way. And we were successful in that argument. While Lionsgate admitted that YouTube was not television and they had the right to exploit on television, we made the point that even if one were to perceive YouTube as television, which it was not, the same analysis would apply because Jillian only was entitled to receive royalties based on distributed units. The idea would be they could advertise her videos on television, but they couldn't put the actual videos on television and destroy the market for the sold units. One argument that I made was that putting it on YouTube would be akin to just putting it on a continuous loop on CNN, Could you put Jillian's videos on a continuous loop on CNN, destroying the market for sold videos just because the word television appeared in the list of manners of exploitation or distribution that Lionsgate had the right to exploit the videos in? No, the idea would be, we argued, that they could advertise the videos, maybe a 15-second clip, as part of an advertisement for the ultimate sale of the video, but they couldn't just put the full-length video on CNN on a continuous loop just because the word television appeared in the forms of distribution. And that is made clear by the fact that Jillian only receives royalties for distributed units. So just because there is some identification of a method of distribution identified in the distribution paragraph, it doesn't mean that they can distribute the videos in a way that defeats the purpose of the agreement. I wouldn't say that was a backup argument, but it was another argument that we made in response to Lionsgate's arguments that the list of examples means they can do whatever they want with respect to each of those methods of distribution. We said you have to have reason here. You can't do anything that defeats the purpose of the agreement, which is to generate royalties for Jillian and Empowered Media. We also pointed to a provision in the Lionsgate agreement that said that Lionsgate had to meaningfully consult with Jillian with respect to any decisions that would affect her brand and image. We argued that their distribution decisions were therefore not unlimited because giving away the product for free absolutely devalues her brand and image, and it tells the consumer that her product is not worth purchasing. We argued that that would be the same thing as if you put her product in a pornographic store, for example. You could not do that without affecting her brand and image. They would have to meaningfully consult with her about that. They cannot just do that on their own, regardless of her views. And this was similar because you are completely devaluing her brand and image by giving away the product for free. We felt very good about our chances on the language of the contract. You know, the thing about litigation is it all sounds so easy after you win. But the contractual language was a challenge. Lionsgate had good lawyers. They made every argument they could, pointed to every bit of language in the contract that they believed showed that they had the exclusive right to distribute in any form of media. We had our take on the language that I've described, but it was a fight. And, you know, we had experts and we fought tooth and nail on these issues. One of the significant challenges we had was that even if we could prevail on the contract language, how could we actually prove damages? Because it would be impossible for us to prove that any particular person who saw the video on YouTube would have purchased a video but for having seen it on YouTube. As our financial expert said, this was the first time in history that a distributor was essentially pirating their own product. That is, giving away a product for free that they were also trying to sell. So the problem we faced was, how do we establish damages? As I learned, there are numerous ways to prove damages in a case like this. There has to be some creative thinking involved, but what the general accounting rules simply require is not a damage model that proves damages without any speculation whatsoever, but just the best available analysis under the circumstances. There are several methods that have been accepted for establishing damages. One is called the before and after model. One is called the yardstick model, and there are other models involved. But what we did was we showed the increase in Jillian's videos up through the date of the launch of BeFit. And then we showed the decline in her video sales that occurred simultaneously with the BeFit channel gaining traction and views of her videos. So while Jillian's videos became the number one viewed fitness video on the BeFit channel by far, and as her views on the BeFit channel were increasing exponentially, her sales of videos were decreasing, which, made no sense if we are gauging her popularity, because Lionsgate was arguing, these videos are older. Of course, they're not going to sell as much as time goes by. But that argument was completely belied by the fact that she was by far the most popular viewed fitness personality on the BeFit channel, those very same videos whose sales were decreasing contemporaneously with the views increasing. And we had a marketing expert, one of the preeminent marketing experts in the country, come in and say it would be a waste of time to do a survey of consumers to ask whether they would purchase the fitness videos that are on YouTube, because the point being that you'd essentially be asking consumers whether they would be willing to pay for something that they can get for free, and that is preposterous. So through that analysis, our economic expert came up with damages to Jillian and Empowered Media of well over $5 million in lost sales. And at the end of the day, we tried the case, lasted for several weeks, and the arbitrator ruled in our favor. The arbitrator ruled that Lionsgate did breach the contract on several levels, that the language did not give them the right to give away the product for free, that the distribution language was limited by the examples of methods of distribution that were all paid for, and by the clause under video on demand, which, as I said, Lionsgate admitted that YouTube was video on demand, it was not television, and that the language had and other paid for methods of distribution. The arbitrator also agreed with us that the language in the agreement that said that Lionsgate had to meaningfully consult with Jillian when it came to matters that affected her brand and image also prevented them from distributing the videos on YouTube. They did not meaningfully consult. They breached the agreement by failing to meaningfully consult. And Lionsgate argued that did not involve distribution decisions. And once again, we argued that was preposterous, that they could not just, for example, put Jillian's videos in a pornographic site or in a dollar store. That diminished the value of her brand and image. And meaningfully consult meant that they couldn't just give lip service to consulting. They had to actually meaningfully consult. And if they did not reach an agreement with her, then they couldn't do it. And the word meaningfully was very important in that regard. And we had an expert who said that in this day and age, that if they wanted to, for example, create this BeFit YouTube channel, meaningfully consult would mean that if she objected, they would need to give Jillian some equity in the BeFit channel so she could benefit on the upside of its success. And we gave examples of other celebrities who were able to get equity in a similar situation. And again, the arbitrator agreed with us on that as well. So at the end of the day, the arbitrator ruled in our favor, agreed with our financial analysis, agreed that we set forward the best possible financial damage model that one could create under the unique circumstance where a defendant, a movie company, was actually, in our view, pirating their own product and were defeating sales of their own product. It was something that we had never come across before. And the arbitrator awarded Jillian and Empowered, I believe, $5.6 million. Jillian and Giancarlo will be here today not only to discuss the case, but also to discuss how the proliferation of YouTube and free content has affected the industry, how their business model has changed over the years, and what Jillian and Giancarlo are up to today. I think it'll be a very interesting show, and I can't wait for you to hear from them because they are terrific and have become very good friends of mine. Before we go into my interview with Jillian Michaels and Giancarlo Chersich. I want to digress for a moment because there was a story in the news this week that is important and bears mentioning. Digital Music News reported that songwriters are apparently not being paid by the performing rights organization ASCAP for performances that occurred in late 2019, while publishers are apparently being paid. Let me explain the significance of that and the issue. And for those of you who are not familiar with performing rights organizations, what they are and what they do. There are two performing rights organizations that collect the lion's share of money from public performances, BMI and ASCAP. Most people don't understand that venues that play music have to get a license to do so. That's where BMI and ASCAP come in. All songwriters and the publishers who own the musical compositions become affiliated with either BMI or ASCAP. They give BMI or ASCAP the right to license the songs and musical compositions to venues like football stadiums, hotels, restaurants, and most prominently broadcasters who broadcast shows that have music in them. And BMI or ASCAP, BMI and ASCAP, I should say, don't just issue individual licenses. They issue what are called blanket licenses to give those third parties, the broadcasters, venues that perform music, clubs, etc., the right to perform any of the songs that are controlled by both BMI and ASCAP. Now, the formula by which BMI and ASCAP then pay the songwriters and publishers based upon the performances on broadcast networks or at the venues is a complicated one. And in a future show, I'm going to have Scott Schreer on. Scott is the owner of a company called TuneSet, which tracks the performances of music on broadcast networks and helps songwriters and publishers collect appropriate money from BMI or ASCAP. There was a concern that there was an underreporting of the actual performances, and TuneSet was created to help songwriters and publishers get paid appropriately. So I'm going to have Scott on the podcast. It's a very important issue, and it'll be incredibly interesting to hear what Scott has to say. But with respect to this issue that has come to light this week, it's important to understand the distinction between publishers and songwriters. The major music publishers, most of the publishers, I should say, that are affiliated with BMI and ASCAP are major music publishers who are affiliated with the major record labels. They have great resources, they have legal departments, they have much more firepower than individuals who are songwriters. And apparently, according to Digital Music News, the publishers are being paid on time and timely for performances that occurred in late 2019. On the other hand, the individual songwriters who are just individuals and in this time of COVID-19 desperately need their royalties are apparently being delayed, according to Digital Music News, and a leaked memo internally from ASCAP is the basis of their reporting on the royalties that are being distributed, and the COVID-19 pandemic is being blamed for the delay in their payments. That is outrageous. There's no reason that songwriters should not be paid on time and timely on royalties that were earned from late 2019. I understand that performances at venues have fallen off a cliff in 2020. I understand that COVID-19 has caused problems in 2020, but there's no reason that songwriters should not be paid for performances that occurred in late 2019, even if payable in March or April of 2020, particularly if the publishers are being paid on time and timely. The only distinction, it seems to me, is that the publishers are mostly major music publishers with deep pockets and resources to ensure timely payment, and legal departments where songwriters are individuals. But we cannot stand for songwriters not being paid. It's not fair. It's not appropriate. And if this does continue, and if this is in fact true, there may very well be lawsuits on this, and we will be keeping very close track of it. So, Jillian, how are you today?
I'm good, as good as can be right now. How about yourself, Richard?
Good. How are you surviving this? What are you doing on a daily basis these days? Because you're in LA.
Yeah, no, I know. I still have a lot of work, which is actually keeping me sane. The kids are definitely going a little crazy, so that's challenging. But we're trying to find activities. We're playing a lot of Monopoly. We're going on a lot of long walks. What about yourself, big guy?
I'm just like living the dream in a sequestered 700 square foot condo in LA. So it's just Groundhog Day every day.
Yeah, I know.
So let me ask you a question, Jillian. There's one thing that I did want to ask just to begin with. Giancarlo is your business partner, and he's the CEO of Empowered Media. Is that right?
Yeah.
And did you know, and I just want to ask you this question, how do you feel about the fact that Giancarlo's favorite pastime is watching mukbang videos?
Oh my God.
No.
Is that good?
Everyone,
like
it is Easter
thing?
Sunday. What are you doing, dude?
I gotta tell you, Richard, it is disconcerting. You know what I mean? Like it's often been something that's kept me up at night, and I try to kind of push it to the back of my mind and focus on his good qualities. You know what I mean?
If he has any, but let me ask you, for people...
he has one, he makes me money, and that's the one that matters to me the most. But other than that, I know he's a scary character.
For people who don't know what mukbang videos are, I think mukbang videos are videos where people kind of watch others eat disgusting fatty food. Is that correct?
It's all over YouTube. I actually did one with my son. And you just like eat and talk to the camera. It's very bizarre.
And for someone whose business and profession is fitness, it's just a little bit ironic that your partner would like mukbang videos.
I agree, Richard.
Weird.
I know.
I
know, buddy.
I wanted to play a game with you, Jillian, to begin with, because we're going to get into, your business, what you're doing these days, the case that we had against Lionsgate, and, how YouTube and the proliferation of, free content has affected the entire industry. And we'll get into kind of some serious things. But I did want to start off, because I think this is important, is I want to play a little game with you. Uh-oh. And the game that I came up with is a game called Gun to Your Head.
How appropriate.
And this is, I guess, for both you and Giancarlo. And what the concept of the game is that Jillian Michaels has a gun to her head, so she has to choose to eat one of two of the most unhealthy, disgusting foods there are. And you have to pick which one you would choose if a gun was to your head. And this came up in my mind because I remember you and I were at the arbitration hearing where we were having lunch and I had a Coke in front of me drinking, and you were like, what in the hell is that? And why are you drinking that? And it made me realize that and I had to throw it away and drink water instead. But I was thinking,
you were a lazy pig, Richard.
Exactly,
That's what it made
a
you
lazy
realize.
pig.
I know.
That's exactly what I am. And so I came up with this idea. So here, I want to play just a few rounds of gun to your head with the great Jillian Michaels. And here we go for round one.
Okay.
And I'll start with this. An entire box of Fruit Loops or an entire loaf of white bread.
Entire loaf of white bread.
A 12-pack of Coke or a entire plate of bacon and sausage.
Oh, bacon and sausage.
A 12.
Who gave you the show? I just want to know who was like, this is a great idea. Give one of the best legal minds in America a podcast.
Okay. A entire pot of coffee creamer or a bowl of canned frosting.
Canned frosting.
Okay. And knockout round.
Yeah.
2 bowls of cheesy fries or 48 chicken nuggets.
Cheesy fries. That was easy. At least one was easy. Gosh.
Is there any food that you could be forced to have to eat with a gun to your head that you would just say, shoot me instead?
Yeah, I'm not into like animal organs and guts and stuff. That stuff is just like, it just grosses me the F out. Like,
Jill, how about boiled octopus over linguine?
No, I just can't. No, I don't. I can't do like what are those Texas oyster, Rocky Mountain oyster? Like, no shot. You just put a gun to my head, like bull testicles. No, brains and eyeballs and puke. I can't. It's disgusting.
Fettuccine Alfredo or glass of white sugar.
Fettuccine Alfredo. Oh God. Whew.
All right. So I think I think that's pretty good. All right. So let me just ask you guys, you, Jillian, and I don't think, obviously people became aware of you through The Biggest Loser television show, but not many people, I don't think, know how that all happened. So have you always been focused on fitness? Has this been a lifestyle for you? Was it learned? How did you get into this field and kind of become, the personality that you've become in this profession?
Well, I fell into it pretty organically in my teenage years because I was kind of an overweight kid and bullied in school, like the typical cliche. And then I got into martial arts around 13, and by 15, I was a healthy body weight. I was in fairly decent shape with regard to fitness. By 17 and a half, I was training for my black belt, and then people would see me at the gym and ask me if I was a trainer. So I kind of fell into it without ever giving it a second thought. And I did have a period for about 3 to 4 years in my 20s where I was like, I better get, a responsible job. So I ended up working at a talent agency as a motion picture packaging agent, and I've never made less money, and I've never been more miserable. So at about 27, I ended up getting back into fitness, and I was working at a sports medicine facility helping to rehab patients under the supervision of a physical therapist and physiatrists. And I ended up building that business for them. So by 30, I was like, you know what? Well, I was actually around 29. I was like, I could probably own my own business and have these doctors work for me, and I would still work under them. So that's what ended up happening, and that's actually where I met Giancarlo at my sports medicine facility. And then I I ended up getting on Biggest Loser. So, it was very organic. I think that because I was kind of a chubby kid who was troubled, I learned really early on that feeling fit and strong transcends into every facet of your life.
But how, the question I think would be most fascinating to a lot of people is, how did you get from just having your own little thing to getting on Biggest Loser? That seems like a monumental jump. Like, how did they even find out about you? How'd that happen?
Well, ironically, that time I spent at the talent agency allowed me to build a very industry heavy clientele at the sports medicine facility, which also was a gym. So when patients would graduate from PT, they could go on to personal physical therapy, they could go on to personal training, or they could just start in personal training. So a lot of those people that I used to work with, I was always the one in the office giving people nutrition and fitness advice because I was a trainer before going there. So one of the agents that I used to work with the place was called International Creative Management, had heard about Biggest Loser. He was training at my gym, and he was like, NBC has this show. You should go meet for it. And at the time, it was really there were things like the Swan on TV, and it was just kind of about humiliating people. And I was like, nah. And I kind of got convinced to go in, and it would be harmless to go in. And to make a very long story short, I did end up getting on the show. And it was, all transparency. The producers I'm not even going to pretend the producers had every intention of humiliating these people. And then all of a sudden, myself and the other trainer I was working with, Bob, ended up getting 100 pounds off these people in 8 weeks. And they were like, wait a minute, maybe this is a feel-good show. And it kind of took off from there.
Amazing. And at the same time, and I've talked about this before you guys came on, I talked about our case that we had, and I talked about your deal with Lionsgate. So how did, you have had and still have some of the biggest, if not the biggest selling fitness videos ever in the industry, ever. And how did that come about? Well, you made a deal with Lionsgate, and how did you come up with the concept for the fitness videos that you did?
Well, I think obviously, when you take 100 pounds off somebody in 8 weeks, there's a fascination factor, and people were wondering, what the hell we were doing. And so it was, shortly after the first season of Biggest Loser, there was an opportunity to start building a brand of like, okay, this is the diet that I adhere to, and this is the fitness science that I follow. So there was a desire for it in the market. And Lionsgate wanted to do Biggest Loser videos. And I was like, there's no Biggest Loser brand. It doesn't exist. There's me and what I do, and there's Bob and what he does. So I said, I'm not going to do Biggest Loser videos. Why am I going to give everything I've done and I've created to them? Which was a huge problem over the years and created a massive amount of tension. But I ended up, because of that, doing my own videos with Lionsgate. And I was like, look, you do your Biggest Loser stuff. And of course, Bob will do all that for them. And this is my brand. This is what I do. So I said no to doing Biggest Loser, and they gave me fitness titles of my own. But at the time, they were in a panic about what I wanted to do and that was, I think the first one was 30-Day Shred. And they were like, oh, the word shred, no one says that. That's way too aggressive. And, you want these 20-minute workouts. Nobody's going to do that. And, this is where, not to sound like a jerk, but at the end of the day, so much of what you see right now, I created. Like the HIIT intervals, the metabolic circuits, the 20-minute workouts, like all that stuff was all created by me and was all, kind of unheard of, the word shred. Like no one did that. This was when I was 30. This was 15 years ago. So it ended up being the most successful fitness title of all time, more than anybody before me and anybody after, whether it was even Jane Fonda or Buns of Steel. Like we crushed it, and that kind of begot in empire for those titles, of course, until the world changed and DVDs were gone. Now it's all about our app, but that's kind of how it began, and it was a huge business.
And so, Giancarlo, let me ask you this: you met Jillian at the gym? Is that what I understand? At where did you meet her originally?
Yeah, so I had moved from New York to Los Angeles in 2003 and started working out. I happened to be, at the time when I moved, I was consulting for the same talent agency that she worked at, ICM, for one of the executives there on some branding deals. And an agent at the agency, I asked him, like, hey, do you know any good like private training facilities? And he's like, oh yeah, go to this place. So it was the same location Jillian owned. Jillian wasn't my trainer, but as a smart business operator, she knew who all the clientele and customers were. And we established a relationship, and we went out to dinner a couple times to get to know each other more. And I very quickly saw that there was a potential in Jillian, probably bigger than she even realized, just by her approach to how she talks to people and gives you the real deal, but at the same time is empathetic towards you, but at the same time is results driven. And when she got on Loser, the first season or two, the show necessarily wasn't what she thought it was going to be. It eventually evolved, as she mentioned, but then she was off the show. And then she came back on season 4, or was it 3, Jill? Yeah, she came.
No. I did 1 and 2. You're right. I did 1 and 2. Not there for 3.
And then she came back for season 4.
And then came back 4.
Yeah, and then I, having a branding background and having worked at Tommy Hilfiger Corporate and some other places, I had, we had a real conversation about what is it that you ultimately want to do. And when she explained it to me, I said, look, I really think you have the opportunity to become the one woman synonymous with the category, the way Martha Stewart is with home, and Rachel Ray is with food, and Oprah is with lifestyle, and Ellen is with comedy, and Susie Orman with money. And that's pretty much what we set out to do. So I first worked with her as a licensing agent and tried to put some deals together. And then I was up with my contract, and I said to her, I was like, if you really want to build a business, I'll be your partner and we can do this. A lot of things might not make sense, but if you trust me like I trust you, we can do something special, and the rest is history.
It really is. And now that I know both of you, it's an incredible partnership. You guys just, play off each other so perfectly. So as far as the Lionsgate contract, which is how you and I and Jillian met initially, I've kind of gone over the details of the contract before this interview, but essentially it was a deal where Jillian was to make these fitness videos and she would get paid distributed units. There was no idea at the time about what YouTube might become, or obviously that Lionsgate would one day give away for free what they were supposed to be selling. But in fact, Jillian, you, as you mentioned earlier, created what are the top selling videos ever in the industry. What are the names of those titles?
God, there've been so many. I'm trying to remember. The first one was 30 Day Shred. And then there was Banish Fat, Boost Metabolism, No More Trouble Zones. I think there was a Yoga
Meltdown.
Yoga Meltdown. Was that in that 6? There was
Yes.
6 in that first deal.
And then
I think
Shred
it with weights. Yeah, which was kettlebells. And then I can't remember what, there have been so many titles along the way. I don't remember what the 6th one was in that first grouping. Do you, G?
Yeah, 6 week 6-pack.
Yeah, that's right. Oh my God.
And so it was going, incredibly well for a while. And then, fast forward to 2011 or so, end of 2011, beginning of 2012, and all of a sudden, Lionsgate creates this BeFit YouTube channel. When you first heard about BeFit and saw your videos popping up on there. What was your reaction?
Well, at first I was like, wait a minute, how's this even possible? Like, how are they getting away with this? That begot a very long process to figure it out. And it turns out that they didn't end up getting away with it thanks to you, but they did for a real long time.
So, Giancarlo, I guess this question is for you. Once you saw the BeFit channel emerge on with Lionsgate content, including Jillian's videos, were you bothered by it? How did you decide to address it?
Well, it was actually a complicated situation because on one side of the equation, we were involved with producing content for YouTube through one of our other partners. But concurrently, once we found out about the BeFit channel, we were in an actual audit. And I raised the issue, and basically, because audits take time and we weren't sure on how the audit was going to turn out, we basically asked that we would continue with the audit, and if it couldn't be resolved, what the accounting would find in the process, then we would reserve those rights. And ultimately, that's what ended up happening. When we got the final audit report, we realized that there was no accounting for, quote, this free content that was being distributed through the YouTube channel to the tunes of hundreds of millions of views.
So if I remember correctly, and this is kind of refreshing my recollection, I think what happened was you raised the issue, and then I believe Lionsgate came back and said, this is outside the time period of the audit. So all rights for all parties were reserved, and that issue was carved out of both the audit and then the settlement or resolution of that audit. Does that ring?
Yeah, now that you refresh my recollection with that, yeah, it does. That's exactly, I'm almost positive that's exactly what ended up happening.
So let me ask you, why did you think that this was so important to pursue?
Well, here was the thing. We dominated the retail shelf space. The average retailer, like a Target, like a Best Buy, like a Walmart, had 24 pegs of DVD content. We were at any given time, anywhere from 14 to 18 of those 24 pegs represented at retail. Like the CD disappeared in time, and digital took over and file sharing took over. And for us, I knew that if we didn't get a handle on this situation, we were done long term. There was no way we would have been able to continue operating the business today. I mean, we're in 2020, and this is something that took place in 2016, 2017 from a legal point of view, but a problem that started in 2012 for us. I remember reading an article earlier in 2015 in the New York Times about you, Richard, actually. And what struck me about the article in the first two paragraphs is that the writer had compared you to Al Pacino in Devil's Advocate. And we knew that if anyone's seen that movie, Al Pacino is Satan, but he plays the lawyer. And then your balls quote was, "They don't see me coming." And I was like, interesting. And that's where I said to Jill, if we're going to sue Lionsgate, a studio, like who the fuck are you and I on the scale of, power players in Hollywood to even go after these people? We're going to have to protect ourselves with someone outside of the quote Hollywood legal equation, because I don't know if we'll have a fair chance. And I called on a transactional lawyer, and he happened to mention you, Richard, months later. And I was like, oh, I know exactly who you're talking about. That's the guy from the Blurred Lines case. And I think it was like November, December of 2015, you accepted a call from my assistant, and we got on a call. And a couple of years later, we won a judgment against Lionsgate to the tune of $5-6 million. And it was a very difficult decision to make, because essentially we were alienating ourselves against the studio. But I do have There is a lesson in all of this at the end of the day that we can talk about a little later.
Well, why don't you tell me, what is the lesson?
Well, I don't know if you recall, but after all things were settled and done, the global president of distribution actually got into a new business deal with us in a different aspect of our business. He didn't have originally a dog in the fight, but it was interesting to me when I was sitting in his office thinking to myself, wow, I was bold enough to convince my partner to go after this studio. We fought. At times I thought we were not going to prevail. Probably the most difficult time for me was after it was all said and done. And I want to say it took 5 or 6 weeks to get a ruling on the case. And then have him reach out to me, the global president of distribution, after all was said and done, to establish a relationship, which is crazy. It's just crazy. Like, how does that ever happen? You know, typically when you sue someone, you sever the ability to ever work with them again. And I guess, you know, he's a man of good standing and a man of value. And when the decision came in, he accepted it and moved forward and realized that Jillian was still a massive force in wellness and fitness and wanted to figure out how we could work together.
Right. And it was, you know, I mentioned this earlier, once it's over, everything seems so easy and clear. It's the way in every case. You know, when you win, it all seems like, oh, of course you won. But, you know, Lionsgate put up a massive fight. I mean, they claimed that they had the right to distribute your content in any form of media. And they claimed that, you know, they could distribute this on YouTube because of the language in the contract. And of course, we argue that nowhere does it say free, and that this is no different than, like, for example, just because it says they can exploit it on television doesn't mean they could put all of Jillian's videos on a continuous loop on CNN 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That, you know, that meant they could advertise, do very short clips, but certainly not put the content up. And, you know, we won, and it was a very satisfying victory. A couple of things that I think, you know, and to Jillian's point about the fact that her videos, and you know this, guys, that one of our challenges was proving damages, but, you know, Jillian's videos made up maybe, I don't remember the exact percentages, but it was like 5% of all of the videos that Lionsgate put up, but yet her views were like 50% of all the views, which showed that no one was interested in pretty much anything but Jillian's videos. And at the same time, her sales of videos were actually decreasing, which made no sense. So we were able to, the challenge was proving damages, but, you know, the arbitrator was smart enough to see that. You know, I have several really fond memories from that trial. One of which was, Jillian, you'll probably remember this. You know, Jillian, you're one of like the toughest people I've ever met. You can take it, you can dish it out, all of that. But I remember, and I don't remember exactly what was happening, but I was cross-examining this expert that they had so mercilessly, if you remember correctly. And you couldn't even take it anymore. You were like looking out the window, whistling like, please stop, please stop. Now, do you remember that? That was so funny.
It was painful, painful. But he deserved it. But oh God, it was
actually honestly like watching an episode of The Sopranos and not knowing what Tony Soprano was going to do to someone. It was bad. Jill, I'll never forget, like, you literally were driving your nails into my hand. Like, are you hearing this?
Oh God. Yeah, it was brutal. But the guy, I mean, that's
the things they were saying were so preposterous. Do you remember? I don't remember if this was it, but do you remember when we had a break, and during the break, the expert witness was in the middle of his testimony, and we took a break, and we come back in, and my first question, I'm sure that he wasn't prepared for this, and he wasn't prepped for this question, but I asked him, "What did you just discuss with the counsel during the break?" And he says, "I don't remember." I was like, wait a second.
Yes, I remember.
Wait a second. This happened 5 seconds ago. what did you discuss? And he said he didn't remember. And I said, no. You're not going to get away with saying you don't remember something that just happened. We just took a break and you had a meeting, right? You sat in the room with your lawyer. What did you discuss? And he just kept saying he doesn't remember for at least, I mean, that might have been what you were when you couldn't take it anymore, but that was really funny. And the arbitrator ultimately looked at me and goes, Mr. Busch, you're not going to get anything more out of him. But his credibility was absolutely destroyed at that point. That was really funny.
It actually got to a point, Richard, where Jillian and I didn't want the trial to end because it was so riveting that we're like, I mean, I think the Trump had just gotten elected, Jill. I think when we were sitting there, there was so much going on in the world, but we were so dialed into this case. And it was just incredible to see what a well-prepared lawyer that understood our case inside out could do to the other side. I mean, you took it to places where I didn't even ever think of.
Well, I really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. And, they gave us a lot of ammunition because if you remember correctly, there was testimony that they changed from their deposition to their testimony. And they were just saying things that were, they were actually taking the position that giving away something for free helps sales, which, come on.
Yes, no, I remember very clearly.
So, yes, that was a lot of fun and we won, and it's always fun to win. What's really amazing to me, and we talked about Jillian's background a little bit, but we haven't talked about your background. You have been involved in, all kinds of business ventures in the entertainment field, from music festivals to, the Jillian business, to working with Tommy Hilfiger and being a senior executive there. I mean, you've seen the transition of the market from a physical goods driven market to this digital market and this kind of wild west of making sure that all possible exploitations are covered. So it's really, I like your perspective on how these agreements have changed over time, because, when Jillian did her first agreement with Lionsgate, it was all about the sale of units. And there had, no one could envision, Lionsgate taking that content and putting it up for free on the internet and then, making money off of advertisements and selling other product, kind of using it as a loss leader. How do you, as kind of the business person behind the Jillian brand, and I know you're doing this with the app, but how do you, and what advice would you give to people out there in protecting the content that artists are like Jillian and others are creating these days?
That's a great question. So, I mean, in the last decade, we've gone from selling millions of physical workout DVDs or DVD systems. Then a couple years after you start to see the attrition and slowdown of the physical, we went into what is called the video on demand model, which was the, people would rent from the iTunes store or rent from their cable operator. And then all of these over the top channels launched all these OTT channels like Roku and some others. And then we got into the subscription side of the business. So in a decade, we've had to completely reinvent our distribution mechanism to collect revenue. While the content remains in play, things that have been, in our library and new things that we do, we've had to completely change all the gatekeepers that we deal with. So we went from dealing with studios and networks, and now we deal with pretty much three gatekeepers, which are Facebook for all of the marketing efforts, which obviously encompasses Instagram, but it's Apple and Google, and that's it. I mean, those are the gatekeepers that we deal with. Fortunately for us, we did exactly what we did early on with establishing strong relationships. We have worked very closely with them, not only to market ourselves well throughout their stores, but also figure out what are the best ways for us to protect our content against all of the piracy and fraud that there is out there. And, we have experienced both fraud from a marketing point of view, as well as obviously piracy with the video content. So the app world has really insulated us from that now, just because there's only two places that you can get it. You either have to have an Android device or a Apple device. Now, we have also found that the television manufacturers are now getting into this. So we just announced it this January at CES, but we'll be shipping this year alone with Samsung, Jillian's app preloaded on about 5 million televisions domestically and backporting close to 20 million Samsung televisions. So it's, Richard, the game, hasn't changed. All that's really changed is the gatekeepers, and we've just got to be sure that we protect ourselves with our content through these platforms that spend millions of dollars encrypting their technology to prevent people ripping us off anymore.
What comes to mind is the more things change, the more they stay the same. And what I mean by that is I once heard a fascinating story that when airplanes became a potential mode of transportation, the train companies had the monopoly on transportation in the United States. But they, rather than adopting to airplane travel and getting the licenses and the routes and developing airports and moving in that direction, they doubled down on train travel and tried to fight progress. And obviously they all went away and new companies emerged that, the new airlines emerged. Had they been nimble on their feet and recognized the future, B&O Railroad, E&O Railroad would have been the American Airlines or the, TWA or the Eastern Airlines or whatever the first airlines were that arose. And it's the same exact concept now, which is you can't fight progress. You have to recognize what is developing and the new means of distribution, and those that can recognize it and adapt survive, and those that can't go away. And the fact that Jillian, after 15 years, has, and with your assistance, has been able to change her method of distribution while maintaining the same message and still being on top is a testament to both you and she being able to recognize the future and figure out how to stay on top of things.
Well, thank you for that. And I'll tell you, our management style has always been to be a student and learn as much as we can. And the truth is, a decade ago, when Biggest Loser was on NBC, it was the #1 rated show on the network. It was posting numbers bigger than The Voice today does. And what we realized in time was we had this virtuous circle of information being distributed around the world via Jill's television show and podcasts and side projects and retail and publishing and workout and live events and touring and all these different things. And people would say to us, oh, but TV is the driving force. TV was the driving force, absolutely, to make Jillian a household name. We did that effectively. But if we would have stayed focused on just trying to do television, we would have been dead in the water today, because we know that TV ratings today don't mean what they used to mean. We know that people don't sit down on a schedule to watch a TV show anymore. They do it when they can and they binge watch. And we have always, that was the one thing we pledged to each other, to always stay humble and be a student, because the moment you think is when you're going to fail your business.
Yeah,
and
I was going to say, it's like when Netflix emerged, rather than everyone at that time recognizing that was going to be the new means of distributing television shows and movies, they fought hard. The cable companies, the movie studios, they fought and they fought and they fought against it. They were like fighting against the future. And now they all recognize that they have to, that's going to be the method. But they're like a dollar short and a day late.
That's exactly right. And there's one constant denominator in all of the change that we've lived through in the last decade when it comes to technology and retail and what have you. It's just convenience, right? When Netflix launched, it was more convenient to go online and have Netflix mail you a DVD instead of you going to Blockbuster Video. And that was an extinction level event. Blockbuster was wiped out, okay? And for us, we said, if people want convenience, what does that mean in our business? And it ultimately means customization. And so we've built our business on customizing what Jillian does for each individual. People have different needs, different goals, and different points in their life where they have, aspects of personal health that they want to impact. And so that's what we do. And we just keep it very, very simple. Unfortunately, what we've now learned is that because there's no physical person to go after in a lot of these new issues, legal issues that we have to deal with, because it's just a lot of bots and all this fraud that happens online, we've had to relearn how to market and relearn how to, watch for where are the holes that we need to protect ourselves with. And I think that'll never stop. And, so our pledge is to continue doing what we're doing until we're no longer relevant or people no longer want it. But to your point, I think Jillian has been cemented in pop culture as that one woman synonymous with a category.
Yeah, I've watched you, just in the time that I've been involved with you now for the last 5 or 6 years, I've watched, Jillian go from a DVD centric business to, I believe you had, and you may still have, a streaming subscription service, to now the app being the primary way to distribute this incredible content. And seems like it keeps getting better and better as you recognize and move to the next, to the next big thing.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, thank you for that. But it's, for the listeners out there, I can tell you, study what's going on in the market, and it doesn't necessarily need to be in your same lane. There are patterns, and we understand that these patterns then trickle down, and ultimately everything has turned into convenience through the palm of your hand. And that's just the reality of the world we live in.
Yeah. And you and I are currently, litigating a few different cases. You've hired me to handle a few different things. And, my reputation obviously has been built on music, but we're in, every type of new age media and technology and the things that you and I are dealing with.
And that's the great thing about, Richard, you and your team, and not to toot your horn, and I love you dearly, but the truth is you understand. It's as if you were the operator of a business, and you understand at the greatest levels the intricacies of what things are. And look, I've had a lot of lawyers work with me over the years. Big firms, small firms, guys that are very reputable. But at the end of the day, there's one constant thing with you. You care, and that's what makes you who you are, because you understand. And when you don't understand, you're not afraid to say, I don't get it. And that's very, very important for my business and Jill's business. And that's why, I feel fortunate to have a guy like you in my corner. The fact that New York Times editor referred to you as Al Pacino's character in Devil's Advocate was what, that was the purple cow moment for me. And, that was pretty brazen.
Well, in fact, I'm going to correct one thing, even though that's, I hate to correct it, but I have to, that actually, I think they asked me a question in that New York Times article. They asked me, what is the secret to my success? And I said that I told them that my favorite part of The Devil's Advocate, the Al Pacino movie, is where he looks at Keanu Reeves and he goes, with your $1,000, $2,000 suit, and your slick back hair, people see you coming a mile away. He said, me, they never see me coming. And
that's exactly right. I remember that. And I remember the photo that they used of you. You didn't have a beard at the time. So you kind of looked like Al Pacino.
Okay. I don't know if it's a compliment. I guess a young Al Pacino. Okay, listen, buddy.
A young Al Pacino. My apologies. A taxi driver Al Pacino.
Well, now I have to tell you that's Robert De Niro. Taxi
I'm
Driver
sorry,
with
Robert De Niro. Which is the one with
let's say a Scarface Al Pacino. I'll take that.
Oh, wow. Yeah. How appropriate.
All right. So speaking of media, let me end this with you on this note. Your app has just been doing fantastically. So why don't you guys talk about your app and what, the Jillian Michaels app is all about?
Yeah. The idea behind the app was to be able to utilize technology in the best possible way, right? When it comes to fitness. And while the DVDs are fantastic, they don't allow me the ability to bring customization. Now with the app, we have over 1,000 different exercises and we're constantly adding. Like now we're adding all audio workouts for when quarantine is over and people go back to the gym, and we're adding meditations on there. But you can show up and say, your current fitness level, the amount of time you have to train, your fitness goals, what equipment you have available. And in seconds, you'll have a custom workout. So it could be, I have 10 minutes, I have no equipment, I want abs, I'm a beginner. And it creates a workout for you. You have access to all the DVD workouts we've ever done because those are in the app. You have access to all the different programs I've created specifically for the app, whether it's yoga, kickboxing, run a 5K, everything's in there, prenatal, postnatal. Plus, we have all of our meal plans. So we've had registered dietitians and chefs create hundreds of recipes, and it's totally customizable. So you can say, I'm vegan, I'm gluten-free. We even have keto recipes in there created by a doctor, because at the end of the day, we appreciate everybody has different dietary needs. We just simply wrap the best science around it. So all the foods are clean. All the recipes are calorie controlled based on your goals. You can batch cook for 10. You can cook for just 1. So there's a customization that was just never possible until app technology. And I think people love it because it's like having me as your personal trainer.
Amazing. Well, that's great. And I'm glad that that's doing very well for you. And I really appreciate both of you taking your time on Easter Sunday to do this with me. We've been doing a lot of work together, and the relationship is really important to me. And you guys have become like family, and I love you both. So thank you very much for joining my podcast. Giancarlo, you have anything else? Last words of wisdom?
I would just say to anyone listening, make sure that any business that you do, you think about how it could negatively impact your life, and make sure that you document things the right way. Because I can tell you, with the cases we've had with Richard and cases that are currently pending with Richard, one of the things that's made his job easier is by having good information. And I think that is probably one of the best, most important pieces of lessons that I've learned in time, is to have that available. It really makes a difference.
It does. And having great clients who tell the truth and who are honest and practice business the way they should makes my job a lot easier as well. So, I did want to mention this before I go, because your sister really deserves recognition. Giancarlo's sister is a emergency room doctor. She's been dealing with patients with COVID-19 and coronavirus in the Florida area. And I know that's been a very stressful time for you and your family, Giancarlo. So just on behalf of everyone, I want to thank your sister and give her the recognition she deserves.
Thank you. Yeah, she's my hero. She's her and all her peers, whether they're any form of first responders, man, they're holding it together for all of us. But I can't wait for this to be over, brother, so we can break bread and laugh.
Yep. Well, we always laugh no matter what, but I just want to see you and be able to hug you without thinking you're going to infect me and kill me.
I love it, man.
Again, Jillian, thank you so much for taking the time and doing this. And you as well, Giancarlo.
I'm sure I'll talk to you on the other 3 legal issues we have going on next week.
I'm sure we will. All right. Love you both, and have a great Easter.